Let's talk about tithing. I've had a lot of clients, a lot of people, friends, others over the years that have asked me about tithing. And do I tithe if you're a business owner? Do I tithe directly from the business or do I tithe off of what the business pays me? Do I tithe off of my gross profit in the business? Or if I'm getting a paycheck, do I tithe off of the gross paycheck or the net after taxes, after other things are taken out? If I tithe after my retirement's taken out, then I tithe on my retirement or different things like that. How much should I tithe? How much should I give and what should I base that on? Is essentially the question that I get a lot. And the questions go on and on and on. So let me give you as exact of a formula as I can, according to the Old Testament, how it was laid out in Hebrew law, what you should tithe. The first thing to note is that tithe means tenth. So essentially it's saying you're giving a tenth of what it is that you make, what it is that you have. In Leviticus 27:30 through 32, we see that a tithe of everything from the land is to be given. Whether that's grain from the soil, fruit from the trees, it belongs to the Lord and it is holy to the Lord. It's set apart to him, right? Whoever would redeem any of their tithe must add a fifth of the value to it. If you want to buy it back, add a fifth of the value to it. Every tithe of the herd and flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rod will be holy to the Lord. So essentially, if you didn't want to give of your stuff, your produce, your animals, things like that, livestock, there we go. There's a word for that. I knew there was. If you didn't want to give up your stuff, then you would need to add another fifth to the total. So essentially, it wasn't just 10% that you give, but 12% of your dollars that you give. Okay? So not giving stuff means you give 12% of your dollars. So let's establish that. It's not 10%, but we're going to go up to 12%. Translate that to today. Essentially, that's what it would be, is to give 12% of your gross revenue to God. Because if you're giving away your inventory, what you sell it for, you're going to add a fifth, because it's a fifth of the value, not what you bought it for, not what cost you have in it, but the value. So what would you sell it for? That's what you would add to it, right? So 12% of whether it's your gross paycheck, your gross revenues in the business, things like that, you can give. Yes, your business can definitely give, and it can give before it pays you. That's all fine, for sure. In fact, that's kind of the way that this would happen. In that time, your agriculture, your land, your fields, that is your business. Your household is your business. When Jesus told his parents, when he was 12 years old, he said, "Why are you looking for me? Didn't you know I needed to be in my father's house?" What he was saying was, I'm 12, I'm coming of age, I'm a man now, I need to be about my father's business, in his house, in his household, right? We see some other examples of this, though. Exodus 23:19, the best of the first fruits of your ground you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God. So the best of what you have is his. Deuteronomy 26:2, take some of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you harvest from the land, put it in a basket, go to the place that the Lord your God will choose, you give it there. Leviticus 23:10, it instructs the Israelites to bring the sheaf of the first fruits of their harvest to the priest. Okay. Tithing was not the only required giving, though, in ancient Israel. There was also first fruits, the bikurim. The very first of the harvest is brought to the temple. The terumah, the heave offering, mandatory portion of produce given to the priests. The second tithe, maser sheni. I don't know if I'm pronouncing any of these right, but I'm going to pronounce them. So that's a tenth of the produce that's set aside to be eaten in Jerusalem during festivals. It's like a festival type tithe, right? Or redeemed for money to be spent there. The third year tithe, okay, in the third and sixth years of the 7-year agricultural cycle, they had 7-year cycles, a tithe was given to the poor, strangers, orphans, widows. In that 7th year, you had the year of Jubilee, where everything went back to its original owner. So you're giving everything back there. Okay, you have your firstborn, the firstborn of the animals, that was sacrificed, that was given to the temple, given to God. sacrificial offerings, shekel of the sanctuary, agricultural levies. So there's all kinds of tithes that come in. In fact, if you take them all into account, you're probably talking about at least 25 to 30% of your income is what you're tithing. That's what you're giving, right? So to be safe, here's the exact formula. Give at least 30% of your gross revenue to God. Okay, once from the business, your gross receipts from the business. And then when you receive your paycheck, whether you're working for somebody else or for yourself, give it from your gross paycheck as well, right? 30%, easy. All right, maybe just a third. You could just round it up to a third of what you get, okay? And remember, under the law, your blessings are directly tied to your giving and your generosity and your ability to keep the entirety of the law. If you don't, then you're cursed, but that's what that is. Do you feel overwhelmed yet? You should. You should feel overwhelmed. This should feel like it's way too much, because it is. And in fact, the law was always impossible to keep, and it is now too. It was never possible for us to do it. It wasn't intended for that. The intention of the law was to point us to God and to say, Lord, I can't, and I need your mercy. I need your mercy. If your blessing is conditional upon this, I need your mercy. Instead of saying, oh yeah, I'll do that, I'll fulfill that. No, it's to come to the Lord in humility, realizing I am not God. But there's good news. Jesus paid for that. Jesus fulfilled the law in its entirety. Every bit of the law he fulfilled. In fact, let me see if I have those pulled up. I had some scriptures pulled up that talked about the fulfilling of the law. Okay. Let's just go through a few of them in case you don't believe me. It is Matthew 5:17 through 18. Don't think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. All was accomplished. Romans 10:4, Christ is the culmination, the end of the law, so that there may be righteousness for everyone who believes. Romans 8:3 through 4, God did by sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh to be a sin offering. I want to get that one a little bit more definite for you, because that one is a really good one. The Romans 8:3 through 4 is, here we go. Let me read the fullness of it here. This was just kind of a synopsis. What the law was powerless to do because it was weakened by the flesh, that's us, unable to do it, God did by sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh as a human to be a sin offering. And so he condemned sin in the flesh in order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fully met in us who do not live according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. He has fulfilled every bit of the law. I could go on and on with more verses about what Christ has done, but he has already fulfilled the law in its entirety, not just in the letter, but in the very heart of the law, down to exactly what it was trying to accomplish in perfection. He died, then he overcame death, and he presented himself to the King, the ultimate living sacrifice, to the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, to God, sufficient, all sufficient for all of us in every way. So now your blessings are no longer tied to your ability to keep the law, but it's tied to Christ's finished work of having already kept it, already done it in perfection. That means the blessings are abundant. That means the blessings are endless. They're not conditional to whether you give or not. And it is not something that is a should or should not. You are under no obligation to give. That scares a lot of people. A lot of people think, whoa, don't tell people they're not under obligation to give. Of course, we're under obligation to give. No, you are under no obligation to give. That obligation has been fulfilled. The requirement has been completely fulfilled. If that scares you, it might be time to do a little bit of renewing your mind on that subject, right? Go look at these verses, look at more verses, go search it out and see if it's wrong. See if it's wrong. See what Christ has already accomplished. God wants our giving to be done from this new heart that he's placed in us because of our trust in Christ, our faith in him. That new heart that he's placed in you is Christ in you, and it's perfect, and it's complete, and it is abundantly generous and abundantly giving. That's why the Lord loves a cheerful giver. That's what he wants from us. So there is no obligation to give. However, because that obligation has been fulfilled, what that means is that we are free. Free to give however you want to. However you want to. You don't have to fall into a formula. You don't have to give a third of what you have. You don't have to give a tenth. You don't have to tithe and worry about the first fruits and the firstborn, etc., etc. You're free to give how you want to. And what I've noticed in my life is that my giving and my generosity is directly tied to how I view God's generosity in my life and how I view what he does. And the more my eyes are on money and potential scarcity of it, the less free I feel to give. And that's where I need to work in my own heart, my own mind, to renew my mind on what Christ has accomplished and be free to give as much as I want. But you, whether you give none or you give a lot, understand this, you are blessed beyond measure. Incredibly, because of what Christ did. And he just gives that to you freely. Because he loves you. Just because he does. Because that is who he is, and that is how good he is. Do you believe that? I hope that frees you from the formulas. I hope it frees you from the formulas and the obligations of giving, and instead allows you to give from that new, perfect heart that is Christ in you, that is abundantly generous and abundantly giving, because that is who God is, and that is who he wants us to be. So there you go.